I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the concerns gun owners have about the motivations of organizations like the Brady Campaign and at least some of the politicians who push for gun control. Uh, there's a common sense among gun rights activists that Brady Campaign and at least the more powerful gun control advocates basically want the maximum amount of gun control possible. And if that's a complete ban, then that's what they want. Now, there is some evidence for this, for sure, at least from some individuals. For instance, Dianne Feinstein famously said that she would vote to ban all guns if she thought that it could pass. And most of them are not nearly so blatant, and so it's not so clear that that's necessarily what they believe, but there's good evidence for this suspicion. One fact is that I've never heard the Brady Campaign ever fail to support a new gun control measure. So they will say, if you ask Paul Helmke or whatever, if he favors a total ban, he'll say no. And yet, when there is a ban, like in Washington, D.C., or a ban on handguns, as in Chicago, he defends it vigorously. They'll spend money. That will be like their main campaign, will be to maintain those bans. And so it becomes kind of hard for us to take it seriously when he says that he doesn't really want a ban. Yet, he never comes out and says, I wouldn't feel this way if, during the debate over Washington, D.C., if the Brady Campaign had come out and said, listen, honestly, a ban goes too far, we favor registration only, so maybe they should allow it. No, they didn't do that. They said that they wanted a total ban. The other thing is that they claim that they only want to prevent gun violence, and yet the entire premise and methodology that they use indicates that that's not their primary focus. So, for instance, every year they come out with a ranking of all the states, 1 through 50, and they give them all scores, and usually there's about 5 that they score pretty well, and then there's maybe 5 other ones that they score okay, and then most of the rest they don't score very well. Very, very few states have gun laws that they consider appropriate. And the thing is the rankings have nothing to do with the level of gun violence in the states. So a state like California, I think last year it won. I think it usually has their top score. California certainly is not the most violent state, but it's certainly not the least violent state either. It probably has more homicides in total than the other state. Now, it has double the population, so that doesn't necessarily prove anything there, but they never just say, well, this state has the lowest homicide or the lowest crime, so they should win. It's always the states with the most restrictions. And if they're really interested in gun violence, you'd think that they would look at the states with the lowest gun violence and maybe try and emulate them, but they don't. It's based on whatever states have the most restrictions. That's what they like. And I've heard, I haven't seen the details. I've heard it said that the strongest indicator of the rankings is the concealed carry status of a state. So if a state has may issue or non-issue, they get a higher rating than if they have a shall issue. A shall issue state basically guarantees you're going to get like less than 50%. Beyond this, many of the other policies that they support have practically no discernible effect on gun violence. This is, and I mentioned this before, this is especially clear with 50 caliber weapons and with so-called assault weapons. And I realize that is a nebulous term, but shall we say semi-automatic military-style rifles. Now, both 50 cals and the battle rifles are powerful weapons, to be sure, but they are very infrequently used in crime. 50 cals, as best as we can tell, never. I mean, there have been instances where criminals have been arrested who possess 50 cals. I suppose it's possible they've been used and simply no record of it, but as far as you know, they've never been used in crime. I don't know that anyone's ever been killed or even wounded by one. With the semi-auto rifles, they are used in crime very rarely. In fact, I always hear they always cite the North Hollywood bank robbery. Well, the North Hollywood bank robbery happened 10 years ago. Nobody died except for the two bank robbers. They both died. There were a number of injuries, but it begs, like how one failed robbery 10 years ago is proof that this is a big problem. I just don't see it. The causes of knives kill way more people, bats, hands and feet, than do the assault weapons. And yeah, this is like one of their big things. They want assault weapons banned. They want to ban 50 cals. At least when they try and restrict handguns, at a certain level that makes sense, because handguns are by far the most common guns used in crime. But then the next most common guns used in crime are basically pump-action shotguns, and then like bolt-action deer rifles, basically. And so if they were really after crime, then those would be the things that they would go after. And I think the reason's clear. The reason they don't go after those, well, they will go after the other ones, is because fewer people use them, and so it's a smaller base to defend. So there aren't that many people who have 50 cals or who are into 50 cals. And for people who aren't into them, it's just a big gun and it seems very extraneous. And so it's easy to condemn that as unnecessary. And the black rifles, they're more common than 50 cals, to be sure. But it also it's pretty easy. Not most gun owners, I don't know what the percentages are, but I'm sure that a majority don't own battle rifles. If you went after shotguns, you're talking about tens and tens of millions of people. Most gun owners probably have a shotgun. And so it seems like their emphasis isn't on reducing crime, it's on reducing gun ownership, and they're approaching it through incrementalism by going after bans on certain types that, even though they have nothing to do with gun violence or crime in any way, it sets precedents for future bans. And it also reduces the total number. So you get rid of one type of gun, you've taken one step in that direction. So this isn't to say, I don't think most gun control supporters think this way. But among the people in charge of the organizations and among the politicians who continually put this stuff, they seem to feel this way. Now, Carolyn McCarthy, who's probably the #1 gun control person in Congress, I believe she's a true believer. She had a personal tragedy, and I understand that that's probably her motivation. The other ones, they're basically hypocrites about it. Chuck Schumer and Hillary Clinton and Dianne Feinstein, they all avail themselves of guns all the time. Like Dianne Feinstein had a concealed carry permit, and she justified it on the grounds that she needed it. So they're definitely incrementalists. They just want to take over as much as they can. Your average gun control person who you're going to argue with at a Tea Party rally or something, they probably don't view it that way. But unless they can be dissuaded, they're also liable to favor whatever controls are proposed. And so even if they aren't thinking in terms of a total ban, if today they propose banning 10% of the guns, they'd support that, and if they propose the next 10% next year, they'd support that, and it's unlikely that many of them, unless they could be dissuaded, would ever get to the point where they say, wait, well, that's too high a percentage. So when you're talking to people, it's not good to just assume that this is their motivation, but this is the motivation, or at least it appears to be, for at least the powerful minorities who steer the movement. So I just thought I'd mention that.